Oh, so I wrote an abstract for the session. I'll put the abstract on the screen. Okay, let me do that. There you go. There you go. It's a good abstract as well. I put a lot of time into that. Honestly, IT's... Is this being recorded? I don't know if it's being recorded or not. IT is really boring, right? So let's try and make it a bit of fun. Like, yeah, so the plan is I'll just do everything live. Like, hopefully. I've got a video, like some dogs or something to watch if it doesn't work, but no, we'll just do it all live. That's the plan. It's like this, fingers crossed. I'm guessing you're all ACI customers? Or you just fancy coming along for a chat? Okay. Yeah, that's cool. And this is working okay? Yes, before people are deafened. I think it starts at 1:45, so I don't know what the time is now. 5 minutes. Oh, yeah. So I do some amusing anecdotes, but I'm shattered. I got in at 1 o'clock yesterday morning, so I'm not very wide awake. 25 hours, I think the flight was. It's fine. From the UK. Yeah. Yeah, I've done it lots. It's like, okay. Yeah. It was via Dubai, actually. So I had about an hour and 45 in Dubai. So literally just landed. God, I had to switch terminals there, which is a real arseache. But yeah, so then I just stayed up yesterday all the way through. Then I did the professional thing and went straight to the bar last night. Had plenty of drinks. So I tried to then sleep last night. So... Oh, yeah. So these are not like a silent disco, right? Where you can just change the channel and change onto somebody else if it's boring. Yeah. So no falling asleep either. It's like it's the end of the day. Yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, and I've got a breakout on Thursday, like a 90-minute, like proper detailed breakout. Hopefully, I don't know actually. I should know that. If it's a big one on Thursday, it might well be mine. I'll tell you when it is. Thursday, 1 o'clock. Yeah, 1 p.m. Thursday. Yeah, that one. I'll bring sweet. You don't call them sweets, yeah, lollies. So I'll bring lollies just to keep yourselves awake while I'm doing it. Yeah. So just while you're settled, who's already automating their networks? No one? Who does cut and paste on Notepad? There you go. Anyone use Postman? Anyone do proper Terraform? No? Okay. This would be quite good. So whose network's got more than 50 switches? Okay. Okay. Who's got multiple networks? Okay. Oh, so this might be all right. Okay. You might, hopefully this will be quite good. So I use this all the time, the stuff that's behind this, and it's all published as well. So at the end of the presentation, you can go and download all the code to make it all work. Often what we do in Cisco is we say, oh, you should automate your network. That's all we say, you should automate it, and then we don't tell you how to automate it. So all the configs from my environments are all published. The configs from this lab will be published as well. So yeah, you can just hopefully go and get started easy. What's that stuff? Automate it, yeah. No. That's, yeah. Okay. So I don't think it's being recorded, but so my view on that is, if you can do it yourself, why wouldn't you just do it yourself? Oftentimes with CX, they'll do a project for a customer. I've had this heaps of times. They do a project, they hand it over to the customer, and they go, laters, and they walk away, and then the customer goes like, well, how do I feed and water this? Like, how do I keep it going? So yeah, let's have a quick look. We're starting Q2. Any more for any more? Is it Q2 start, isn't it? Minute. Oh, I should get that out. So I'll ask it anyway. But who thinks they understand all the like access policies and best ways to build your tenants and that sort of stuff? If anyone was going to say yes, I'd challenge you. Like, I'd be like, really? Like, okay. Should we kick off? So let me go right back to the beginning. Okay. So I'm Steve Sharman. I work as a solutions engineer. I think that's the new title of the year. And I've worked with ACI since like before we had it. And what I'm going to take you through is how I run my networks. And it's all automated. And I'll kind of do it live. At least that's the plan. There's a video if it doesn't work, and videos are boring, right? So hopefully it's all going to work live. There's a bunch of slides in this deck, but we've only got half an hour. So I've put some material together. So you might want to take it away and kind of go through the slides afterwards. And as I said before, I'm doing a big session on Thursday. That's like a 90-minute full-on deep dive on how everything works. This is hopefully a bit higher than that. So you should have the app by now. Everyone should have the app. And then hopefully you're all here to see the bottom point, which is like your presenter stand up and think, okay, this is cool. I'm going to do this. This is going to be good. And then cross his fingers and toes, and hopefully it's all going to work absolutely fine. And then the other one's really like, access policies, tenant design, contracts. I'll kind of go through that and explain how those things work, or at least how you should use them. So how do you do ACI? It should be as simple as this. Okay, it should be, right? You're going to rock up, you're going to log on, you're going to configure interfaces, you configure your tenants, you add your contracts, you step away, life's good, it's all working. Hopefully, that's what you should do. Now, I've looked at like literally hundreds of customer networks, and there's never a common way that they build the config. They all like kind of mess around, and they do it one way, they do it a different way, and there's sort of no consistency. And the other problem that I see often with customers is that you have different people configure the network. And so one person does it one way, one person does it a different way, and then you've got no consistency of that build. I don't mind if you laugh. And I don't mind, by the way, I don't mind if you disagree. And I would love questions as we go through as well. That would be perfect. So step one, we're going to configure our interfaces. So as I'm sure you all know, when you configure interfaces, there's loads of different policies that you configure, like VLAN pools, domains, AEPs, all that kind of stuff. What you should really, really do is that you focus on your policy group. So you focus on the definition of what you're attaching to the network. That's the key thing to focus on. And then everything else will come off of that. So at the top, I've got my switch profiles and my leaf profiles. So the two things tied together. So it's called leaf 102, and it relates to the virtual, the logical instance of that switch 102. What I'm going to do to that is I'm going to apply my policy. I'm going to name my access ports based on what I'm attaching. Then I'm just going to add the interfaces to it. So this is the best way to build your interface config. Since version 5.2-ish, there's a new interface wizard, and it builds it in exactly this way. But even if you've got an existing network, you've done things manually, this is really how you should build out your access policies. This is the most consistent way, the most flexible way, and it's certainly going to help you troubleshoot much, much easier. What it will mean is that you'll have lots more policies than you've probably got today. So in this case, I would have like a VLAN pool per type of device that I'm attaching. So I've got, if this was say Nexus 7K, I'd have a VLAN pool for my Nexus 7K. So you're going to have lots more policies. Now, if you're in the UI, that will take you some time. It's being polite. It will take you some time to configure. When we automate it, it's going to be really simple, really easy. Next thing we need to do is build our tenants. Now, hopefully everyone will know this. You can read the text later. Over here, right, we're going to build a tenant called demo. We're going to put in there a VRF. And then we're going to add things to it. So most people build a single bridge domain with a single EPG. That's the way that most people build things. What you can do is that you could add different EPGs on a BD. That's an option. You could add multiple gateways and multiple EPGs on a network. Or you could use ESGs. So all of these building blocks, you're kind of expected to know how to put them together. And so for that, you really need to have a design blueprint. So these are the different patterns, and there's only 6 ways that you can build an ACI network. That's it. There's no more than 6. And these are how things tie together. So your first kind of option is that you put everything in common, in the common tenant. Nobody does that because that's really just a lab kind of thing. The next option that you've got is that you'd do a split design. So in common, I've got my VRF and my BDs, they live up there. And inside the tenant, I've got my VLANs down here. So this is kind of your second option for how you could build things. What this allows you to do is to share subnets across different tenants, because the subnets, the BDs, live in a shared space. So everyone can use those subnets. Everyone can use those BDs. The third option that I've got is that everyone can use the VRF because the VRF is shared, but the subnets are reserved per tenant. So again, I started off before the subnets are shared, and now inside the tenant, the BDs are per tenant or per use case. Then the next 3 that we've got, the one that most customers do, is that they build this. They put everything inside a tenant. So in here, I've got my VRF, I've got my BDs, my EPGs, my ESGs, contracts, everything goes inside a tenant. And I'd imagine that's how most of you build your network, because that's kind of what people do. So my preferred method is this. So I don't use tenant common. I use a shared services tenant, a dedicated tenant. And in there, I put my VRF, an outside VRF, and that does the external peering. So that does the routing. My layer 3 out sits there. And then inside the tenant, I've got another VRF, and I've got all of my subnets, and I route leak in between. At which point you're all probably thinking, well, route leaking is like really hard to do. Why would you do that? That's super complex. So how route leaking works is pretty easy, and I'll show you because we'll automate this as well. So I use this, and I would recommend this to most customers. That's certainly my recommendation. And then the last option that I've got is I kind of combine those things together. So my shared services tenant does inside-outside routing. I use my tenant common there so I can stretch subnets across them. And then I place the VLANs or the EPGs inside a tenant. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of how you should design your particular tenants. But you've only got 6 choices. That's it. Only 6 choices. And you pick the one that makes most sense to you. Customers often say, is there a right way or a wrong way? So the kind of answer is really kind of like the wrong way is when it doesn't work. Or more likely, the wrong way is that you've designed something and then you find out that that doesn't scale. So if I went back slightly, if I designed this and then said, actually, what I want to do is have another tenant, but I want to have this subnet in a different tenant as well, then this design pattern wouldn't work. You'd have to redesign your network. So understanding why and how you'd pick which different design pattern is super important. It's really important to get a grip on. So if I go forward. And then the last thing that you need to do, so the third step is that you need to let things communicate on the network. Most customers build contracts with really unhelpful, is maybe the politest way of describing it, unhelpful names. So in this case, I've got 2 security groups. I've got one for my front-end service and one for my cart service. So my contract is called Permit to Cart Service. So hopefully you all think, oh, okay, well, I can talk to the cart service. That's the aim of it. What's that contract going to do? Well, it's got a subject of TCP. I'm going to allow TCP to communicate. And then I'm going to give it some simple names. So TCP source any destination 7070 or source any destination 443. So hopefully you can all think that, well, the source, the consumer over here, is talking to a provider over here. Source port is any, destination port in this case is 443. That's what's going to be allowed through the network. Most customers don't give it helpful names. They'll call it like, I don't know, web or database or something like that. So the simpler you make the naming structure, the easier it is to troubleshoot. Now, if you do this in the UI, you've got lots of screens to click through and it will be time consuming. So we're going to automate this. And this goes the same if I've got UDP traffic or ICMP. I'm going to specify how this works. I'm going to make it really easy so that when anyone looks at it and says, here's a redirect policy, it's going to redirect anything with a source of 80, source of any and a destination of 80. That's what's going to be redirected. That will go to the firewall. So is that clear on contracts? Hopefully, like everyone kind of, I'm going to assume that you know that. So the next thing to do is like, how should you do this? So I asked kind of briefly earlier how people configure their network. Now, how I do it is I use the GUI to kind of verify what I've done because I'm going to automate it. I use the CLI for troubleshooting. You know, I can type IP route, VRF, blah, quicker than I can find it on the UI. And I'm going to use Nexus as code to actually do the configuration. So why do I use Nexus as code rather than an Ansible or Terraform, kind of native Terraform or Python service now? The reason I use NAC is because it's easy and because I'm lazy. That's the reason why. You can go and learn Terraform, like full Terraform if you like, all the providers, all the resources, etc. What NAC does is it hides the bulk of that away from you. So it gives you all the benefits of Terraform, but without learning it. And if you can write a file in YAML, and we'll look at it, that says, here's my tenant name, here's my VERF, here's my BDs, here's my EPGs, etc., etc. As long as you know how things work and the building blocks, I would always go with this. The reason that I also really like it, apart from being dead easy to use, and we'll do this when I jump on and run a demo, is that when you've configured your network, because it's got a state file, it knows what it's configured. And when I go and destroy the network, it will remove it all. Now, a huge problem I always see with customers is that when they configure their network, they've got leftover code. So they've done something, they've made a contract or they made some filters, they thought, oh, I'll just leave that there. They never clean stuff up. So a question I normally ask customers is whose network has got more than 50 faults? If you logged on your Apex today, who's got more than 50 faults? If no one says yes, either you're all totally amazing or you're maybe not quite being truthful. Most customers have more than 50 faults showing in their controller. Right, honestly, who's got more than 50? Who's got more than 100? Who's got more than 500? I've seen a customer with like 1,000 plus faults shown in their controller. Those faults are because they've got leftover code. They've configured something, they've half deleted it, they've not cleaned it up. Therefore, it's really, really hard to troubleshoot. Ideally, you should have less than 5, less than 10. It should be like really low number of faults that you have. So NAC itself, it's a framework that we've built. It uses YAML. That's the way you're going to configure your network. And Nexus as code, as it was called before, now does more than just Nexus. So there's ACI providers and NDFC providers. There's now SD-WAN providers. There's an ICE provider. So we're going to extend it into other products as well. But the premise is the same. And the premise is that we write the modules and then you just consume them. You just write a simple text file, a simple YAML file, and you use that to do the configuration. So Terraform itself, for those that's not used it, you just download it. It's just an executable. You stick it on your laptop. In a bigger environment, you would want to take care of the state file. You'd want to know how you back up your config and where that runs. But for the purpose of this, I'm just going to run it off my laptop and show you exactly how that works. So it's got kind of 3 important points to it. You've got the provider, you've got the resources, you've got the variables. So you'll have all the code anyway, but if you're kind of running native Terraform, then you build it something like this. This would be your code that you'd build. And I said before that I like to use NAC because it's easier and because I'm lazy. You can go and learn all of this. And for some customers, that's absolutely the right way of going because they want to do Terraform and maybe stand up, I don't know, some VMware infrastructure and some ACI infrastructure and something else at the same time. So they might have a team that just builds automation. But if you're a team of network engineers and you just want to get going, then NAC is going to get you going much, much quicker. So to get started, you go and download it. You just go and get the file, you put it on your laptop, and you're good to go at that point. I'll show you exactly how we do this, but the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to do an init. So on the directory, we just do a Terraform init. What that's going to do is it's going to look at your file that you've got. Again, I'll look at it, so don't worry too much about it. And then it's going to pull down all the providers that it needs to have to make this work. Again, you specify that once, it pulls all of that down. You can say run the latest version. You can choose to run a specific version. It's going to look in your directory, and then it's just going to suck all that information in. At that point, you're kind of ready to go. So the first thing that you'll do is we'll do a Terraform plan. What that's going to do is it's going to look at your network and say, I'm going to plan. So what's the current config? What do I think it should be? And what's the differences? So you do the plan first of all, and then you'll apply it. So you'll then apply the changes, and it's going to push all of the config into the network based on your plan. So you do a plan, then you do an apply, and your network's configured. And what it's going to tell you when you do this, it's going to tell you the output that it's expecting. It's going to tell you what it will do. I'm going to configure these BDs, these EPGs, etc. It's going to build all of that for you, and it's going to tell you what's going to happen. In a larger environment, customers will actually output this, so you can create a plan and do an out, and it'll write a text file with all your config in as well. But for the purpose of this, I won't go down that path for the purpose of this lab. Okay, so NAC or Nexus as code. The aim of this is to make it easy. That's the whole point of Nexus as code. Like when you sit there and you think, oh, I need to go and learn Terraform, it might be like learning French. Like who wants to go and learn French? So do you want to learn a different language, or do you want to use a simple kind of text format that you'll be used to today? And provided that you can write your code out in a simple structure, if this was a native Terraform way of doing it, in this case, I've got a resource that I'm going to create called Cisco Live. I've got some variables. The name of my variable is going to be like VRF01. So this is kind of your native Terraform code. If I looked at it with NAC, it looks like this. Build a tenant, build 2 VRFs. That's it. So the structure of how you build the code is really straightforward. And what we do inside the kind of the way that this operates is that we separate what you're going to manage. So I'm going to manage these different things, tenants, access policies, and what have you. Then I'm going to apply this configuration. So the modules itself, this is what we build for you. So we do all the back-end heavy lifting. We're going to create all the config so that all you have to do is write a text file. So you can say, I don't know, DHCP provider, this is the name of the provider, this is the IP address. We're going to say VRF, this is the name of the VRF. You can create a contract and you define how that operates. And then you're going to structure it. And I'll show you live kind of how it looks. It'll be a bit more interesting, hopefully. But all of the config is all pushed. So you've got a data model. At the end of the presentation, have some links, and it tells you all of this. So don't kind of stress about this for now, because we'll see it live. I'm hoping that everything works live, by the way. The other kind of super good thing about it is that I can do some specific defaults. So if I was converting an existing config into an automated config, what I would do is I create a rule, a defaults file that has a suffix. So everything it creates has got a new suffix. And the reason that I will do that is I will build a parallel config. Because most customers, you've all got an ACI network, you've all got config there already. You don't want to just overwrite what you've got. You don't want to just hope it's going to work. So what we can do is build a parallel config. So I'll add the _BD, in this case, suffix. And that way, when I push the config, I'll have my existing config, and then I can shadow config. And we'll look at how that works. So the whole point of this was to see the presenter panic and think, is this going to work live? Right. So we'll get building. This is how I kind of build my access policies. So an access policy has got loads of things. I've got my VLAN pools, my domains, my APs, etc., etc. I'm really old school, right? I stick this in a spreadsheet and think, oh, I've got a VLAN pool called firewalls that maps to my firewalls domain, to my firewalls AP. It's got these settings. It's tied to a VPC policy group. And then I'm going to put it onto ports 15 and 16 on these leaf switches. So I build it in a spreadsheet simply so I can visualize and think, how do I want these things to hang together? Because most customers put a name down here, and then by the time they get up here, they've forgotten what that name is they put down here. So I like to visualize it. I like to put things in this easy to look at table, think, right, this is what I'm going to build. So for this lab, fingers crossed, this is what we'll build. So I'm going to build a tenant. And in that tenant, I've got a VRF that does external routing. So I'm going to configure my OSPF. I'm going to configure my OSPF policies. I'm going to configure an external EPG. I'll get that configured as well. And then I'm going to build another VRF, and I'm going to route leak between the VRFs. And I'm going to build some BDs with EPGs. I'm going to build some ESGs for security. I'm going to add a firewall in there for service insertion. And in the code that you'll get, it will have layer 2 and layer 3 firewall insertion. And then I'll put some contracts in place that allows me to talk from my outside world through the network to my security groups that sit here. Now, if you do this on the UI, I can guarantee that you'll sit there for the best part of half a day, because you'll start configuring, you'll think, oh, those names are no good, I should change that to be something different. Then you need to work backwards and undo all the things that you've done and then go forward again. And you do this backwards and forwards until you get the config right. With NAC, we don't need to do this. So in the slides, you'll have all this stuff, but let's see what happens. Okay, so if I come out of that, there we go, back there, come on, back there, let's go out of that, go to here, and go to here. Okay, so when I built this lab, so I'm based in the UK, and to run an APIC remotely to the UK is like really slow, because it's whatever, it's 600 milliseconds or something up to there. So I built it all on my lab, and then I built virtual APICs. For those of you not use virtual APICs, just run it on VMware. It's dead easy to do. So I've got a virtual APIC cluster in the lab in Sydney, and that's what we're going to test against, hopefully. So how I structure it. So let me just clear that up. Oops. Okay. So remember I said the first thing that we need to do is configure our access policies. So when I build my config, so this is like just my directory structure, and then there's some important files that you need to look at. So there's main.tf, you need to look at that, it's important. We need to look at our variables file and TFRs. So I'll tell you why that's important. So main.tf, all that I've got in here is to say, where do I get my username from? What's my password? And what's the IP address, the URL? I'm going to say, where do you get the Terraform code from? So anything above 0.8.1. And most importantly, where are the files that I want to use as the configuration? So in my data directory. And then what do I want to configure? So in this case, I'm going to configure interface policies, node policies, fabric policies, etc. This is kind of a build once. You build this, you're happy, you're good to go. In my variables file, it just says, okay, what's the username, password, APIC URL? And in my TFRs, this is where I put my username and my password and the IP address. That's where that lives. Once I've done those three things, that's what ties everything together. Then in my data directory, actually, let's come out of that. If I go into here, we'll look at two different ways on how you build out this config. First way we're going to look at is multiple different files. So this is how I do it for access policies. I've got a file for everything I want to build. My VLAN pools, my domains, my AEPs, my leaf profiles, interface policies, etc. I have a separate file for each of those. And the reason that I have a separate file is just to make it easy. There's no other reason. So in this first file, my VLAN pools, what you'll see here is I've got a VLAN pool called firewalls. It's static allocation. And then my firewall management uses VLAN 10. My cluster control link uses VLAN 11. My data interface uses VLAN 12. Hopefully, everyone can read this and think, oh, okay, I get that. For my VDS, I'm using these private VLAN pairs, so 2001, 2002, 3 and 4. So hopefully you can all look at that and think, okay, that's easy. It's just some text file. If I look at my domains, for example, I've got my firewall domain uses my firewall VLAN pool. My routed domain uses, this is the name of the VRF that I'm going to use on my router. And then the VMM domain, I've got that as well. Similarly, if I look at the policies, in here, I'm going to build the different policies. So I've got CDP enabled, CDP disabled, port local VLANs. I think everyone should be able to build a text file that's kind of in this structure. The only thing that you need to think about when you do this is you need to get the indentation correct as we go across. So at the end of the presentation, you'll see how there's a add-on, if you like, an extension for VS Code, and that lets you kind of see the indentation, rainbow indent it's called. So there's my policies, and then the thing I said all along to focus on is like the policy group. So just here, so there's a policy group. So this is my cluster control link on my FTD. So type, it's a firewall, it binds to the AEP. I've got these settings. It's really simple to visualize. I don't need to click through lots of different screens to do this. And then when I look at up here at the leaf profile, what you'll see here is there's one for leaf 1. And leaf 1, I'm going to configure my firewall management on port 11. Very straightforward. I'm doing my cluster control link, uses port 13, and so on and so on. So it's just a text file with your inputs. So when we want to run this, so if I go back to the APIC, Fabric and Access Policies. So at the minute, this will be empty. So I've got no profiles, I've got no policy groups, nothing's configured. There you go. Yeah, I've got no VPCs, no nothing. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a Terraform plan. So you can kind of type out Terraform. I've just got shortcuts. So TF plan to plan my deployment. So this is going to go and build all of those access policies. So it's going to add 182 or make 182 changes to the network. VLAN pools, APs, domains, you name it, it's going to go and configure that. All based on this configuration. And the way that it works is it basically sucks the config out of all of these files. It runs it through the module that we've got and then applies that onto the network. So that's why I've split it out into different folders or different files rather, just to make it easy to see. And then if I do an apply, so this is just a shortcut. I'm not going to do that with Terraform. You can do, say, approve a change. I'm just going to apply the change automatically. And then you cross your fingers. Okay. So if I look back at the UI, so we can now see that all of this is being built out. So it's taken that config, and I'll just click on that one. And it's gone and built all of this. Now, if I wanted to change that config from being, I don't know, port 14 to port 15, I'll just go back into that YAML and change that config. I don't need to think, oh, how does this object relate to this object, relate to this object, relate to this object? I'll just build that structure once. So that's my access policy configured. I'll go back here. Okay, so I've got another folder. Let's go here. Okay. So I've got two options how I'm going to build this. So option 1 is that I separate my config into different files. So the first one builds the basic config. It's going to build the tenant, build 2 VRFs. It's going to configure the BDs, the EPGs, etc. This one here is going to build all the contracts. So if I just make that smaller. So up here, I'm going to build the filters at the top. You know, source, TCP source, any destination 22. So all of this is a fixed format structure. Then down here, I define my contract. So permit to ESG production. It's going to use that filter. It's going to use that filter, etc. So I build my contracts, and then I'm going to apply them down here, down to the different ESGs I've got. So this provides a contract, permit to production. It consumes a permit to development. So I'm just going to build this in this text format. Similarly for the firewalls, what I'm going to do is build everything. So SLA timers, I'm going to build my, down here, the redirect policies, how to redirect to the firewall, the different destinations it's got. So for doing the redirect, I've got my layer 2 policies. So all of that config is held in this one file. The other way of doing it is that I could build a file that contains all the config. So you've got both different examples. This one contains everything. So there's no right or wrong way. You don't think, oh, I must build separate folders and separate files like this. You could just build it in one big file. Why you do one or the other? I used to build all of mine in separate folders, separate files like this. And then the more you use it, the more you think, I'll just have one big file. So it's really personal preference. There's no right or wrong way. And then once you've built this config, what we can do is a Terraform plan. Whoops. So this is going to build all of my tenant stuff. It's going to add 226 resources to build up my tenant. And when I do an apply, I'll just auto approve it. So what you'll see happening is it builds out the tenant. And then in the tenant, see if this is still running. Oh, it's finished now. Everything will exist in here. So, for example, my services, so my firewalls, devices. So all of this is configured. Look at the networking, the VRF. So I've got inside and outside VRF. My outside VRF is going to leak routes. So it's going to leak a prefix, default route prefix, and it's going to leak it to VRF2. And VRF2 is going to do the reverse. It's going to leak its subnets, the BDs, and it's going to leak these to VRF1. So all of this config is just built for you. And if you do it wrong, or if you want to get rid of the whole thing and clean it up, if I go back here, I can just destroy it. So that is going to go ahead now, and it's going to clean up my network for me automatically. All of this config that I pre-built will start dying. There you go, and it's gone. And I can do the same thing with my access policies. And if I wanted to add something new, so if I wanted to add, I don't know, like another contract, another filter, for example. So say I wanted to have 8443 as well. So I would just go and change this to say 8443. And save that. So in this case, I'll just apply the whole thing. And then what I'm going to do is I'll remove just this one and show you the difference. So once this is all applied, contracts, filters. Right, look down here. Contracts. And you'll see up here, just here, this is where I'm now using those values that I put in. If I want to remove just specific parts of the config, then I can just take that, remark those out, save it, do a plan. Do a plan, it's going to tell me what it will change. So it refreshes the whole config. Oh, there's no changes. My save probably hasn't happened. And then, oops, I auto approve. Okay, so that's how we use NAC. And so the reason, as I say, I use it is to make my life easy. If I went back to the slides, at the end of the slides, just here, there's a whole bunch of resources that you can go and have. Let me just put it in slideshow for you. There you go. So on my GitHub page, just here, you'll see all the config that I've got for my different environments. If I just jump out of that and take you across, go. So if you go there, repos. So in here, I've got loads of different tenants. And so if you went into one of these, for example, you could go and pull the code. So you can go and take this and then think, oh, okay, what I want to have is a firewall configured. So building a new FTD config, and that's your config to build it. So I said right at the beginning, we're really good at saying automate your network, but we're really bad at giving you code to go and get started. So in this repo just here, you've got, so there must be like 20 or so different tenants that I've got here. So all of that is pre-built. Take the code, pull it down, change it for what you want, and get started. And if I looked in shared services, data, and you'll see in this particular tenant, all I've done is configured my layer 3 outs. This is a shared services one. I've just done the layer 3 outs. So I am 5 minutes over time, which is not bad, right? Like, that's not too bad. So any questions? There should be a prize somewhere. There's so there should be somewhere. There should be a penguin underneath someone's seat. I don't know whose seat's got it, but someone should have a penguin. And then there's a prize, but I don't know what the prize is because it's not that switched on. So whilst you're looking for a penguin, questions? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you could override things. Yeah, yeah. You don't need to though, because you can just override things. You can override a specific module. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you can do that. I do it all the time. Yeah, just have lots of different versions. Yeah, you can do that. Other questions? No. Hopefully it was an enjoyable session. And yeah, I'm presenting Thursday. I've got a 90-minute slot on Thursday.